Good evening and welcome. We begin today's news with updates on the event that happened over the weekend, the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have spoken with the former president. The president spoke to the former president yesterday evening, and they had a brief and cordial, friendly conversation. As the president said in remarks and comments yesterday, that he's glad that the president is okay. Today, the vice president called the former president and also had a cordial and brief conversation on the phone with the former president. And speaking of moving to news that we are paying closer attention to, today President Biden met with the World Bank president, President Ajay, to review programs to reduce global poverty and as well as address climate change and other programs that the World Bank is working on. This meeting, of course, come ahead of the UN General Assembly high-level meeting that we kick off next week, and also ahead of the World Bank IMF annual meeting that will take place next month. We will be providing updates on the meeting when we get a readout from the White House. And now, speaking of the UN General Assembly, the press secretary confirmed, the White House press secretary Karine Jean-Pierre confirmed today that President Biden, as we've reported, participate in the UN General Assembly. We travel to New York next week to participate in the UN General Assembly. The president will be speaking, will deliver remarks, his final remarks to the UNGA on Tuesday. And the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield, today preview the agenda, the priority, the three major policy priorities that the U.S. will focus on at the UNGA. Of course, we know that Secretary Blinken, as well as other senior officials, including the USAID Administrator, the NSA National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, as well as other leaders from the cabinet, from the Biden-Harris administration. We also travel to New York to meet with their counterpart, as is an opportunity, as many leaders we try that attending the events from over 130, or almost 200 nations will be participating in the events, and most head of state would usually travel among their delegation, including the foreign ministers as well as trade ministers. So it's an opportunity for U.S. Biden-Harris administration to have a one-on-one with their counterpart in New York. So we expect some of the administration cabinets, Department of Energy, Department of Agriculture, the USTR Trade Administrator, just some of the few that we expect that we also travel to New York next week to hold one-on-one bilateral meeting with their counterpart. So among the three policy priority for the U.S. The UNGA is to address threats to international peace and security with a focus on a collective responsibility. So the U.S. will be calling on other nations to join hand in hand together for a holistic approach to addressing the threats of international peace and security. As we see, is a global issue. We see the war that is going on in the Russia aggression against Ukraine. the issue in the Middle East, the issue with China and the South Sea as well, China and the Philippines, and we see issue also in Africa as well as issue in other developing countries, the security issue in Haiti as well. So those are just some of the areas that they will focus on. Another one that the number two priority, the second priority that they will focus on is revitalizing the overstretched system of humanitarian to support those in need the most. And the U.S. will be calling on other nations as well, especially the wealthier, those that have the resources, the wealthier nations, to contribute. The U.S. is the largest contributor to the global humanitarian aid. So they will use that opportunity to call on other nations, G7 leaders as well as European leaders and some from the global south to support some of the humanitarian, to contribute more to the humanitarian assistance, the need that we see, the growing need that we see around the world. So that will be part of the agenda, the second agenda. Then we also call for innovative ways and sustainable and hygiene response to address humanitarian crises across the world. The third policy that they will focus on is to create a more inclusive and effective international system. Of course, there will be a summit of the future, a UN summit of the future where leaders will gather. So the US will use that opportunity to call on nations as well for a chance to drive change forward. The US also will hold the U.S. government will also hold a mini series on the sideline of the UNGA UN General Assembly on Sudan to meet with the Sudanese forces, and as we've reported, the U.S. envoy for Sudan and the U.S. has led this dialogue to bring about peace and find a solution and end to the crisis, the war in Sudan and the humanitarian crisis in Sudan. So on the sideline of the UN General Assembly next week, there will be a mini series with African leaders and other leaders from other countries that have been part of that negotiation, of that dialogue. So we will be bringing you more updates on that. And also, as usual, President Biden is expected to hold several bilateral meetings with other leaders. Some might probably, as we reported, his first speech to the UN General Assembly. They held the president and the first lady held a dinner for the African leaders. So we don't know yet whether this is something that will take place, because we're still expecting to hear a confirmation on the president travel to Africa sometimes before the end of this year. We know that the president will be traveling to Angola, as he said in remarks when the president of Angola, President Lorenzo, visited in November of last year, and he was asked if he will visit Angola, and he said definitely he will visit. He has been to Angola and he will visit Angola again. And we have reported to our audience, we know this, that the president of South Africa, President Ramaphosa, extended a state visit invitation to President Biden. So we've been trying to confirm whether the president accepted that invitation. President Biden, daughter-in-law, the wife of his son Hunter, is from South Africa. So President Biden also have traveled to South Africa various occasions. It was part of the U.S. delegation during the calling, traveling, and urging for the end of apartheid in South Africa. And the South African U.S. relationship is one of economic and trade and diplomacy, and it goes back for a long time. So we will be bringing you more updates when we receive confirmation from the White House, when the White House confirm the president's travel to Africa. Moving to other stories that we are focusing on today. The USAID, this in regard to the UNGA at level meeting next week. We also hold a democracy deliver event on next Thursday. We along with other inviting leaders from Africa and other nations that will be participating in that event. We will be covering that, and we will be bringing you updates on that event as well next week. And now moving to other stories that we are focusing on today, that we're paying closer attention to. Kenya and Germany signed a migration and mobility partnership agreement to provide pathways for Kenya workforce to train in Germany, and vice versa for Germany also to travel to have opportunity to work in Kenya. So President Ruto and the German Chancellor last week, over the weekend, signed this MOU agreement between Kenya and Germany. And the other story, that President Ruto also met with executives from Volkswagen that are looking for exploring opportunity to build a manufacturing plant in Kenya. We will be bringing you more updates as this is a story that they are still exploring, so we will be following that story as well. Now, speaking of Africa and the growing needs of the continent and relating to impact of climate crisis, that we're seeing the extreme flood on one side, in one region, and extreme drought in one region. The African Development Bank recently last month launched a new a new funding program to provide gonna go through my note very quickly, sorry. A new financing program of the African Water Facility program secure 12 million euro from Nordic Development Fund to support African governments, utilities, private sectors to expand access to safe and sustainable sanitation in African cities. There's a growing need across the continent as more people move from the rural areas to the urban cities to seek better opportunity, better economic opportunities and workforce. There is more demand, more burden on the current system. So this fund, the goal of this fund that was launched late last month, August 27, is to mobilize $320 million to support 15 sanitation projects across the continent, connecting at least 15 million people in urban areas to better sanitation. 10% of the 320 million will come from climate-focused funding source. This is a story that we bring you additional updates on this as well. So as I said, ahead of the more information regarding the UNGA and additional information When we get it, we will provide that to you tomorrow regarding the President Biden meeting with World Bank President Ajay Banga today, and other additional updates and new news. We will provide that tomorrow. So it's raining here. Um, so we this wrap up our news for today and updates for today. I hope you have a good evening, and I will see you tomorrow. I'm Kemi Oshikoya. Have a good evening.